Hello, Florence, the birthday girl. Shall we continue with chapter 27, Stitch Up? I think a stitch up is when you blame somebody else for a problem. But I'm not sure. You frame them like that's it, they say. Let's find out. Shenanigan was not the first to reach the scene in Aunt Schadenfreude's study. People were already walking away groaning, "Not again," as if someone had started up an unwelcome game of charades rather than tried to commit murder. Flora was sitting upright in Schadenfreude's red armchair. There was a neat hole in her chest, just below her collarbone, and she had her finger pressed against it, like the Dutch boy from the story, plugging the dam with his finger to stop the flood. At first, Shenanigan thought there wasn't much blood, but then she saw Cook's red-stained apron and Flora's black dress and realized much of it had soaked invisibly into the chair on which Flora was sitting. Cook turned when Shenanigan came in as if to shoo her away, but her hands were too busy tearing strips of gauze. Behind Flora, a bookcase had swung back to reveal a dark stone passageway with steps leading down. There were two suitcases waiting just inside. Shenanigan was almost knocked over as Fauna flew into the room. She grabbed her sister's hands, slick with blood. "Flora, can you hear me?" Flora's face was gray, but her eyelids fluttered. Something slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a dull clink. "What have you done now?" "What have you done now?" Flora laughed, but it was a laugh that could snap in half at a touch. "Someone's gone and put a hole in you." When Flora didn't respond, Fauna turned to Cook. "Whatever it was, it's gone straight through," said Cook. "That's better than the alternative. Renee, did you find Candor?" "I'm sorry, no," panted Renee, stumbling into the room. "Fortissimo is still looking." From the depths of the house, they heard Fortissimo's booming voice calling for the doctor like a cannon going off. "Right," said Fauna. She turned to Cook. "What can I do?" "You can help me stop the bleeding. Put pressure here. I need to get a few things from the cupboard." Fauna pressed her hands to her sister's shoulder. Flora groaned. "Oh, I'm so sorry," gasped Fauna. "Does that hurt?" There was a gurgling sound that might have been a laugh. "Too nice." "You always say that, but we can't all be stubborn, cranky misanthropes like you." Fauna's voice was steady, but there were tears in her eyes. "Anyway, I have to look after you. If I didn't, who would haggle at markets? Who would chase off debt collectors and tell the neighbors to keep it down? You see, I'm being selfish, really." Flora grinned weakly. Cook returned with a syringe. "I'm going to put her under now." While Cook and Fauna worked, Shenanigan began to pick up whatever Flora had dropped on the floor. They were the keys to Cook's motorbike. Shenanigan looked from them to the open passageway behind Flora and recalled Daisy in her stockinged feet plucking an atlas from the shelf. She ducked beneath Cook and Fauna's arms and put her face next to Flora's. "Flora," she said. "Flora, who shot you?" "Shenanigan, now is not the time," snapped Cook. "I can't ask later if she's dead." Shenanigan's step snapped right back. "Flora, come on." Her cousin's eyelids fluttered. The injection was taking effect. "Find Daisy," she rasped. Into this scene of dramatic tension entered Aunt Jilt, who rapped cheerfully on the doorframe. "Knock, knock," she smiled. "Cook, could we borrow you for a moment?" Cook looked up from where she was cutting away the shoulder of Flora's blood-soaked dress. "My hands are rather full, I'm afraid." Peek stuck his head around the door. "It's urgent," he said. "More urgent than this?" "Rather." Cook sighed. "Fauna, how's your sewing?" "It's fine, but—" "Good. Renee, come here and give Fauna a hand." She issued hush instructions as the two press-ganged nurses to them, and they were all listening so intently that they didn't hear the next bead click into place. There was something off about Peek's face. It was as if he were holding in a laugh. The back of Shenanigan's neck prickled. She followed Cook along to the evening room where a large number of people were gathered, chatting politely. "Ah, good, you're here," said Atrocious. "Take a seat, Cook. Have some tea." Cook glanced down at her blood-stained apron. "I think I should prefer to stand, thank you," she said politely, "for the sake of the furniture." Aunt Jilt poured her a cup. "Now, it pains me to say this," Peek perched on the couch and made an apologetic face, "but I'm afraid we must formally accuse you of murder." There should have been chaos at this. There should have been gasps and protests, and Cook should have picked Peek up bodily and thrown him out the window. Instead, Cook sipped her tea. "Indeed? Yes, a dreadful business. But as you can see, we've tried to make the whole process as painless as possible. Madeira cake?" "Thank you." Cook took the proffered slice. As she chewed, she looked around the room, assessing the odds. There were 20 or so people squashed in. Their gold name badges were polished to a shine, and for the first time Shenanigan noticed Cook had not been given one. All their faces were carefully blank, and they were eating Madeira cake as if they were required to by law. "What evidence, may I ask, do you have against me?" "Evidence?" Peek frowned. "Well, we all sort of agreed that you made the most sense as a murderer, I mean." "We voted," added Aunt Jilt. There was a hat on the table, and someone had used in the mock-up, surrounded by little pieces of paper. Cook studied the largest pile. "Goodness," she said, "look how many votes I got. That's 5 for inheritance. I'm sure she'll be terribly offended. 4 for Maelstrom, 1 for Candor, 7 for Daisy. We haven't ruled out the possibility that she was involved," explained Aunt Jilt. "I suppose I should be flattered." Cook took her teacup and saucer down on the table. Her hand did not shake. There was a smear of Flora's blood on the top handle of the cup. "Any particular reason why Daisy and I were chosen?" "Well, isn't it obvious?" chuckled Peek. "You're not family." Cook's polite smile froze on her face. Until that moment, Shenanigan had thought this might all be a bad joke. It wasn't. Her family had drawn a circle. Inside the circle was anyone with the last name of Swift. Outside the circle was everyone else. "Cook is family," Shenanigan protested when Cook wouldn't or couldn't answer. "Cook isn't even her real name," said Ferrier. "It's Windsor, isn't it? Wilhelmina Windsor or something." "Winifred," corrected Cook. She looked perfectly calm, but her hand clenched into a fist. "And Windsor hasn't been my last name for a long time." "Still, Schadenfreude knew who I was when she took me in," Cook said. "I've been in this house for 20 years. I have been cook for 20 years. "Ah, and that's the problem, isn't it?" said Atrocious sweetly. "We've all read detective novels. When it comes to murder, it's always the help." Cook's jaw tightened, and the muscles in her arms tensed. Atrocious leaned back slightly. "It's the height of rudeness," Cook enunciated clearly, "to call anyone the help." "You're all being stupid," interrupted Shenanigan. "Cook lives with us and loves us. She loved Aunt Schadenfreude. She loves me and Felicity and Phenomena and Maelstrom. Evidence," she cried desperately when they all she got were pitying looks. "You have to have evidence." "All right," said Peek. He pulled out a photo album. Cook jerked. "Where did you get that?" she demanded hoarsely. "You've been into my room. You went through my things." "You work in this house. You live under the roof. You are employed by the family. It really isn't your room, is it?" "For the last time," Cook said through gritted teeth, "I am not an employee." Peek ignored her. He opened the album to an image of Cook, decades younger, on a large grassy field. She was holding a bow and a trophy, grinning. "Isn't this a picture of you training for the Olympics in archery?" "Yes," said Cook, "though I preferred the shot put." Peek turned the page. "Yes, I can see here you must be very strong." "I am." Strong enough to lift a marble bust, I dare say? Oh, absolutely. So you're skilled enough to shoot Pamplemousse, strong enough to club Gumshoe, and close enough to the family to know about the hoard, said Peek triumphantly. What happened? Did you get greedy? Decide being given a job and a place to stay wasn't enough? Thought you'd bump off old Schadenfreude and take the treasure for yourself? Oh, I bet if we chuck Aunt Schadenfreude's will, a large amount of her money goes to Cook. Check it, not chuck it. Piped up Covetous. That's usually how it goes in books, I mean. You're right, said Vendetta. Gumshoe got too close to the truth, so she had to kill him to cover her tracks. And Pamplemousse? Asked Cook. Why am I supposed to have killed him? Peek shrugged. We'll work out that part later. What's important now is deciding what to do with you. Phenomena and Felicity had to agree, or had been right. Shenanigan realized. This was what came from going with your gut, a room full of people pointing fingers. All Peek had was a story, but that was all anyone needed. The eyes turned on Cook were hostile, and on more than one face Shenanigan saw something uglier beginning to form. She began to feel afraid. If Phenomena had been there, she could have poked holes in Peek's theory. If Fauna had been there, she could have calmed everyone down. If Maelstrom had been there, he could have stood tall like a lighthouse in a storm and dared anyone to lay a hand on Cook. But Maelstrom was fighting a different fire. Fauna was helping to save Flora's life. Phenomena was squinting for clues, and Aunt Schadenfreude was dead. There was no one to help. Cook's spine remained straight and her eyes still flashed, but in the pockets of her apron, Shenanigan could see her hands were balled into fists. Right, said Aunt Jilt cheerfully. Let's have another cup of tea and decide what we're going to do next. We don't have a matriarch at the moment, and goodness knows where our archivist is, so I suppose we should open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any suggestions? Lock her in the coal bin, shouted one person. Bury her alive, shouted another. Put her in the freezer with Pamplemousse and Gumshoe, called a third. Hold on, let's do this properly. Does anyone have a pen and paper? One was passed to the front, and Aunt Jill began to take suggestions down, muttering as she did so. Coal bin, bury alive, freezer, dunk her in the lake and see if she floats. That's witches, but I'll write it down. I say we cook her, said Atrocious calmly. She shrugged one elegant shoulder. It seems fitting. The Swifts began to debate the merits of cooking Cook. The tin bath and the bonfire were suggested. Shenanigan shouted in protest until she was picked up, carried to the back of the room, kicking and screaming, and held there while Cook sat very still and did not look at anyone. It was very calm. It was very reasonable. People often reasonably discuss such unreasonable things. Night was on the approach, and the windows had darkened to a mirror shine. In the antique glass, Shenanigan saw the faces of her family blurred and distorted, laid over the trees and hedge maze outside. Then a flash of something white, like two pearls, two more beads clicking into the string. Two hands in the darkness raised, and a pale face between them. Candor. He was wearing his white surgical gloves. Shenanigan's heart leapt. She thought maybe he was coming to help Flora, but no, he was walking away into the grounds. Behind him floated a delicate shape, ghost gray. Daisy. She was holding something in her arms, pointed at Candor. The last of the day's light glinted feebly off the metal stock of the crossbow, the facets of her ring. She turned to look over her shoulder into the house. Even through the chaos and the dark and the twisted glass, Shenanigan was sure their eyes met. Then Daisy pressed Candor into the maze. Plans were never Shenanigan's strong suit, and there wasn't much time to come up with one. Anyway, she went for an old classic. She sagged in the arms of her captors, making sure she was dead weight. It was a trick she had used to avoid baths, and it had stopped working on Cook years ago. But none of her relatives were as wise as Cook or as strong. As soon as their grip loosened, Shenanigan wrenched herself free, sprinted for the room. Let's keep going. Just a little bit more into chapter 28. There's the maze. It looks like it just swirls back and forth. It's called Unmasked. Shouts nipped at Shenanigan's heels as she ran. By the time she reached the grand staircase, any pursuing footsteps had faltered into silence, but she didn't slow down. She took the banister at reckless speed, launched off the polished wood like a ski jump, and landed hard on her shoulder. This didn't slow her down either, but the lock front door did. Shenanigan had to rattle the handle stupidly for a few seconds before her brain, huffing and puffing, caught up. She sprinted through the billiards room where, incredibly, Aunt Dither had a few older people playing poker and ignoring the commotion upstairs. Past the telephone nook, into the conservatory, and out through the cat flap, scraping her knees only a little in the process. The maze was to her left in the distance. The sky had still not given up the last of the light, but it was a dishonest light, trickster light. It bent the world around Shenanigan into the unfamiliar, reaching down with its long fingers to scramble the order of things. Her eyes were worse than useless. Shadows bubbled and popped and burst into new forms. The trees shifted, ground folded and unfolded under her feet. Once she entered the hedge maze, the strip of dim light above her was only pathway. It felt as if she were running upside down. Shenanigan knew her way through the maze by heart, or rather by feet. They knew what to do, and even if she closed her eyes, they would carry her to the center. Candor and Daisy weren't so lucky. She could hear them on the other side of the hedge wall, Daisy breathing hard and Candor moving so carefully he was almost silent. Felicity had once told Shenanigan that any maze was solvable as long as you kept turning left, that no matter how many wrong turns you made, you'd eventually come right. Daisy must have heard of this method too, because she never paused, never hesitated. Again and again her route brought her so close to Shenanigan that they were separated only by a single hedge before their paths steered them apart. But Daisy simply had too big a lead. When Shenanigan reached the center of the maze, a grim tableau awaited her. Daisy, stiff as a marble statue beside her, pointing the crossbow at Candor's heart. Ooh! Daisy! Daisy swung around. There were tear tracks down her cheeks. She had the crossbow and she had the advantage, but she still looked as lost as she had at the funeral. "Oh no, get out of here," she said, her voice frayed. "You don't want to see this. Then don't do it." "Daisy," Candor's eyes darted to Shenanigan and back, huge and black in the dark. "It's all right. We can fix this. You don't have to do anything drastic." Daisy giggled. There was an edge to it. Climactic. "Desperate," Candor ventured. "I know you would never hurt me. You love me." Daisy shook her head. Her grip tightened on the crossbow. "No," she said, "I don't." Shenanigan leapt. She crashed into Daisy with the force she could muster, and the bolt went wide. Daisy looked at the bow in her hands, now useless, and then at Shenanigan. Her mouth opened as if she were screaming and drowning silently, and then Candor grabbed the crossbow for her and cracked it into the side of her head. Daisy drooped. Then gracefully, like a petal falling, she hit the ground. Let's stop right there. I'm going to put a point in that spot on the page. See it there? Because I'm stopping mid-page. Oh my goodness, so it was Daisy off all along. I thought she was like a red herring. A red herring is something they put in the story to kind of take your hint in a different direction, to hint at a different direction. But it seems like she's heavily involved. Heavily involved. Oh, well. Okay, my lovely. Kisses until we read again.